about this morning. It's not an easy thing to talk about, depression, is it? Our own experiences with it, it's, I think, I know we both relate to that, and it's this kind of, that's similar to what drove us to this today as well.
LinkedIn did a study, and there was 83% of job seekers said that well-being is a massive contributing factor to their job decisions as to whether they're even going to accept a job.
Just to make an environment where everybody has the ability to become the best versions of themselves. So an environment that supports innovation, kindness, empathy, supports health, well-being. I think it'd be a much better place if we all just took a step in that direction. Just ask people how they are and actually mean it.
Welcome to the Wellbeing Leaders Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things leadership and well-being. We're your hosts. I'm Charlotte Stebbing-Mills.
And I am Sam Harvey, and joining us today, we have the wonderful Sam Browning, who is a good friend of mine. He's a senior talent acquisition manager at LF Education, previously of Mediclinic, where he's head of wellbeing and senior talent acquisition there. Dad, husband, former ultra marathon. We asked Sam before we came on, like, do you have, what do you want to say? What are your accolades? He says, I don't have many. And then 10 minutes later, he finished. Former ultra marathon runner. He's a judge for the Mental Awards. He introduced the first EAP to Mediclinic for 7,500 people. And he's also a humble genius.
I mean, throw me under the bus, why don't you? I would say the only reason you're able to get so much out of me is because you are exceptional interviewers. So,
yeah.
Listen, all I will say to correct your wonderful introduction is the emphasis is on former ultra marathon runner, very much so.
Gotcha, but that's still a pretty amazing thing to have achieved, mate. So well done.
Thank you.
Tip of the hat to you. And today we're going to have a chat about integrating wellbeing into the recruitment process and the employee experience in general. And so just before we kick off, though, did I miss anything in your introduction? Anything else you want to say about yourself?
No, not at all. I mean, I think other than being a dad to two wonderful girls and being married to my wife, I think saying that I'm a friend of Sam's is probably my biggest accolade at the moment.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here and to have two Sams on the show as well. Like, what an honor. But Sam, like, before we kind of go into like the recruitment side of things, I would really love to know, like, why are you so passionate about well-being in the first place? Because there's a lot of people in talent acquisition that are not so fussed about well-being. So I'd love to know, maybe it's a personal experience or professional, but what's kind of brought you to where you are today and what you're up to?
It's a great question, and I agree with you. So it's both personal and professional is what led me into it. So about 3 years ago, so probably just coming out the back of COVID, if you remember what COVID was, that thing that happened that one time. Of coming out of the back of that, unfortunately, I suffered quite badly with depression due to a number of different things, and it took me to a very dark place. So personally, I was suddenly in a world of having to understand my own mental health, what that looked like, go on a journey down that path. And that was when I started getting into running and all the other things along with that as well. And so as I got better and through things at work, we were at Mediclinic, we were starting to shift more towards focusing on ESG, this corporate strategy of those things. And one of the big pillars is social. And underneath social, very often for companies, is well-being, so employee well-being. And at the time, I was the head of ESG. I took on that project. I then moved over and I took on the role to create the well-being strategy. And it was just purely off the back of having been through something like depression, understanding what it was like, understanding the openness of the world of mental health, sort of what that was, what it could become, what it was to me, what it was to others, how it impacted everything. Even though that was a very small piece of employee well-being and so on and so forth, that sort of teed me up to have this sort of drive to make sure that everybody had access to support when it came to things like that. And that's where I really self-taught, surrounded by experts, working with Sam, likes of Scott Armstrong and other fantastic guys, women and guys across the UAE and the world, in terms of learning what well-being meant to different people, the different strands, the pillars, how it could be implemented at a personal level or corporate level. And then I dove headfirst into that, into Mediclinic. So when we started writing the strategy for it to roll it out across 7 hospitals, all the people, looking at partnering with the APs and so on and so forth. So in doing that is where it got my interest, and then it became something I actually enjoyed. It wasn't just working more. When I left Medical Clinic back in 2023, it was something I was actually very passionate about. I wanted, wellbeing is incredibly, I know I don't have to teach you guys, but it is an incredibly personal thing. It's personal to individuals. Not everybody feels everything in the same way. It's incredibly unique, but equally, it's the same for everybody. Everybody experiences it just at different levels. And so the biggest thing is actually making people talk about it. I love being an advocate, quote unquote an advocate. I like being honest. I like sharing my story when I can, because I've been through it. I've sat on the other side of things. I've been through depression. I've come out the side of it. I've worked with others that have gone through things. I've realized that after going through depression, I actually have ADHD, undiagnosed for 40 odd years. And so now learning something completely different and being kind to myself and what that looks like in work.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I'm going to be implementing here at Aleph as well soon. We're putting into place a new strategy and structure here too.
Nice, mate. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. It's Charlotte and I were talking about this morning. It's not an easy thing to talk about, depression, is it? Our own experiences with it, I think, I know we both relate to that, and it's this kind of, that's similar to what drove us to this today as well. And I guess I found myself wondering as you were talking about that, what your biggest kind of learning was in all of that. And so you've thankfully come out the other side. You're doing well. You're feeling good, it seems. And so what was the thing that you kind of walked out of that, now that you look back on it and look back on Sam, out of the pandemic, and running ultras and all that kind of thing? What's your view on it now, and what was your learning?
In terms of my own depression, what I felt about it and when I came out the other side.
Yeah.
I think, I don't like going back to the same points over and over again, but one thing I learned is that it is incredibly unique, each person's experience of it, and the one thing that I learned is that whilst I do have incredibly supportive and kind and loving, caring people around me, knowing what to say, when to say it to people, it has what's changed. The old adage of, well, just cheer up, be happy. You can get through things. I mean, is genuinely so damaging. Do you know what I mean? Like the intention is as pure as it comes, but actually, until you've been through it, you can't actually help understand and put yourself and empathize with what's going over there. So what did I learn from it? I learned that it is a journey. It's a recovery as such. It's not addiction or anything like that, but you do go through things. And it's taking people at face value when they say something. It's not my job to psychoanalyze where they are. It's to allow to ask questions and care. It's the one thing I say to everybody, no matter where they are. Ask when you ask somebody how they are, because that's now the vernacular. It's go and ask people how they are. Check in with friends, men especially. How are you doing? And it's not just the act of saying it; it's them listening and actually caring. Because so many of us now will say, "How are you doing?" And then the answer will wash over. And so it's actually being prepared to say, okay, look, I've got time now. Yep. I do care. I'm asking because I care, and actually listening to what somebody says without judgment.
That's such a beautiful lesson, isn't it? I'm really curious to know, what has that had an impact on in the way you've shaped wellbeing initiatives and strategies that you've worked on? Because we're moving into a world of personalization really strongly when we look at technology and just the way we function in society. Like that's what we are excited to move towards. That's what everything is being created around, is our personal experience. You've said there is like depression as an example is like super unique for everyone. So how do you see that kind of shaping moving forwards, or maybe even influenced your own strategies when you look at workplaces?
I think the biggest thing is lowering as much as possible the barrier to entry for support across all pillars of wellbeing. Whether it be financial, physical, mental, emotional, community, whatever that is. It is to say that, us as an employer, you think about any business, you think about as leaders, our role is to give space, give access to support for any of these things when people need it, but to make the barriers to entry as low as possible, so that it isn't I had to get to breaking point before I took myself to find help. And that's not because the barrier was high. That's not what I'm saying that. But it's by creating an environment where these things are talked about and are available and are spoken about and are shared constantly within a business, it becomes part of the corporate language. It makes it far easier to access for individuals so that they're not seeking it elsewhere and so on and so forth. So it's trying to, I think the change in medical insurance and providers over in the UAE specifically, elsewhere in the world is very different, but here in the UAE, things have changed dramatically over the past 4 or 5 years. Then, I've seen it since I've been here. So the support is there now. Is it the greatest? It's on its way, but it is definitely there now. And so it's important for employers to actually tell people, actually, you do have access to these sort of things. These are coverages. We'll get on to about the recruitment, recruitment process and well-being. That's a huge selling point. That's a that is a massive USP for businesses to drill down. If people aren't made aware of that, I mean, why not?
Yeah, it's a great point, right? Like it's a good selling tool, and I kind of want to dig into because we could touch on it as that, right? As a selling point to, hey, come join our organization. But I think I coined it, or I thought of this as, okay, so how do we actually take care of the well-being of a candidate when they're coming in to a process, and make sure that that employee experiences from the first interaction right the way through to offboarding, right? Or even after, right? And I think, because you're absolutely right, like we can use it as a selling point, but it should be more than that, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I think there are two different points there. So I agree with you. You have your EVP, your employer, you have your employee value proposition.
Yep.
So that is what we as an employer offer to people that come and work for us, whether or not that is a decent level of medical insurance coverage. It's a well-being strategy that gives people access to those flexible working arrangements, remote working, hybrid, a fun, functional environment. Like people, the transition has been, or the trend has been that people need to understand that well-being offerings for companies aren't just the old adage of a pizza party, but it's all-encompassing. The office environment that you work in, your setup where you are, the flexibility, your working hours, work-life blend, all of those kind of things are part of a well-being strategy. It's not just the monetary value that you could attribute to giving more medical insurance, for example, paying people. So that's the employee value proposition, which is what you would call the selling piece. Okay, so that is a tool that you use to say, look, how this is come and work for us. But in terms of how we look at the recruitment process, it's not going to be the same as our employees when they're in terms of the access to mental health coverage and things like that, because it fundamentally doesn't. But what we need to be doing is we need to make the process as enjoyable as possible, because that affects people's mental health. People aren't looking for jobs because very, very often, the majority of time, people are looking for jobs because they want something, they're looking for something else. And when I say looking for something else, I don't mean a job. They're unhappy where they are. Either they're unhappy at work, they want to earn more money, there's issues at home, X, Y, and Z, or they're in a position where I've unfortunately found myself, they don't have a job. They've been made redundant, and it is now a very pressurized situation. Here in the UAE, we need a visa to work here. To support the family, you need to have something. And so it's already a very stressful environment. And recruiters have been synonymous in this market for ghosting people. They don't get back, they don't get feedback, not just recruiters, but companies. And they get no interaction. So that's the first point. It's how do you deal with the individual when you speak to them? It's not just being a robot and taking information. I always say to my teams that we are the front line of marketing for our business. Very often, because people that we're speaking to aren't customers, we are the only representation that they will have of our business. So if their interaction with us is bad, why would they ever recommend us as a potential to anybody else in whatever guise they're in. Just being kind to people, making them, one of my biggest pet peeves is the way that people interview. And when you sit on panel interviews and it is a grilling and it is one-sided, and the old adage of sell me this pen, and those sort of things, I think there is a place for them. But when you talk about how you want to take care of individuals going through the recruitment process, it's not the way to do it. I pride myself on to think that when I'm interviewing people, it's conversation. The conversational style of interview, I can get anything out of people. I've recruited everything from supply chain directors to vascular surgeons to nurses to teachers to product and tech developers now. And the informal nature of, that's just me, but it leaves a better impression on people. They enjoy the process that they go through. And they're making sure people get feedback, making sure you go back to them, positive or negative, whether or not it's you can give a phone call to every single person, take them through in depth, or just close the loop so that they go, I understand. That takes, it's how you go through all of that. And then that's just the application process. When you step on to where you offer, you start talking about the value proposition. What does that mean? Understanding that nowadays, 60% of the workforce that are looking to move are not solely focused just on salary. It's a huge piece, but that doesn't. For me, if I was offered, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm very, very happy. If anybody's listening, I'm very happy where I am at the moment. Let me just say that, unless it was to become part of your business, obviously. But if you were to offer me better work-life balance, or the ability to work from home, to be with kids, or schooling allowances, they're far bigger considerations than salary alone. And I think that's when you get down to that stage. It's no longer okay for us to say, well, we're going to pay you 5% and more, and you should be happy with that. That's great. But what else does it look like? What is the manager like? What is the culture of the business like?
It's funny that you say that. LinkedIn did a study, and there was 83% of job seekers said that well-being is a massive contributing factor to their job decisions as to whether they're even going to accept a job. So I'm curious to know, from your experience, having interviewed so many people and being part of this process, have you seen that conversation shifting? And if so, what specifically are people more curious about and asking for? Are they looking for the pizza parties, or are they looking for more of the work-life balance, like you've mentioned? Are they looking for the insurance benefits, like more of the systemic issues? I'm curious to know kind of what you're seeing boots on the ground.
So I know I said it, but I don't like the term work-life balance anymore. And that's not just you said it. I shouldn't have said it in the first place. I much prefer work-life blend, which is my favorite one, because synergy is too corporate, Sam. Sorry. You picked that one up from Oxford, didn't you? No, it's a work-life, because it has to be a blend. Like, you can't, balance means something has to give, and that's not fair, because you give it to your family, your career. So blend is anyway. I prefer blend. I'm sorry, I should have gone with that one. What am I seeing now? Far more you have flexibility. So asking about flexible working hours. Now, flexible working hours means, or flexible working arrangements means a number of different things. So that could mean the number of days you spend in the office. That's one level of flexible working. There is flexible working hours. So do you start at 8 and you finish at 4 versus you start at 10 and you finish at 6? What does that look like? Half days on Friday. We have a policy here at Aleph, which is, I've never seen before, but we have a remote working policy. So that means that 6 weeks a year, any of our staff can work anywhere in the world. And that's on top of annual leave, and so it's not all at once. You can't disappear for a month and a half, so 2 months somewhere and just, work from a beach. But they're far more impactful to people, especially the older demographic, the ones that have families and things like that. Schooling, schooling was a huge thing back in the early days of the boom out here. It was full expat packages, schooling covered and everything. Anybody that has kids will know. Schooling is a crippling amount of money sometimes to cover. And so understanding if that's a benefit now. And if it's not, can it be offset somewhere else? They take that into consideration. Are my family covered? Are visas covered for the family? These are the sort of questions you're seeing more now, not just, do we do after work activities, or, what's the office like? Parking. really silly things. Generally you think it's a small thing, but it does have a huge impact. My office is in Abu Dhabi. That's where I am today. I live in Dubai. And so one of the things for me, generally on my the day before I joined, um, one of my team that hired me sent me a wonderful message that said, "Hey, really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Just so you know, when you get down here, is the DARB system in Abu Dhabi. So if you haven't, you need to download the DARB app because it's the tolls like Salik getting into and wherever you can park on the street here. It's going to cost you this much. Make sure you've got that." And you just go, "Wow, that's another thing that I don't have to think about." And it's you go, it's a little thing because then on my first day I got here, I knew where I was going. I didn't have to stress. I mean, it's something that we've continued. Like, it was a wonderful thing that you did, and it was just off the cuff. And so we then formalized it. And so everybody that joins gets the same sort of care, because it's one less. You're always worried about you going to a new environment. Am I going to be there on time? There's a lack of parking around the office. They're actually saying, look, there is tough to find parking, but this is what you do when you get here and things like that. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely, really does.
It's such a good point. I actually wrote this down as you were talking, Sam. Like, basically it's just care, isn't it? Like, you sort of you're touching on something there where we think about customer experience and we take care of that, like our lives depend on it, but not necessarily an employee care. And I think, I'm interested as to whether you're seeing that shifting. But also like, actually, let me ask that first. I'm not going to stack questions up on you. So that's the thing that I'm kind of seeing and hearing, right? Is that you're saying, well, actually, it's just about caring, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, empathy goes a long way. We're all human. Everybody's human. And I think that, businesses are businesses, and it's all well and good us as well-being leaders and as advocates for this kind of thing to say, hey, let's always put people first and make people comfortable. Now, don't get me wrong, we all understand that there is a revenue figure, that there is a target to hit, the business has to operate, but there is a place and there is a blend, shall we say. There's a midpoint where one significantly impacts the other, and if it's not, it can work together in the right way. Yeah. But, it's, why can't be? Kindness goes over everything. We have policies in place for a reason because businesses need structure. Okay? But policies are just that. They're pieces of paper that have words written on them. Yeah. But people are people, they're humans. HR shouldn't be the human robot department. That's not how it works. It's, yes, there are rules and there are guidelines, but why does it have to be so physically strict for every single person? I'm not saying it's a free-for-all, but a great one I saw somebody post about the other day is out here, labour law-wise, states that you get 30 days annual leave per year, okay? But you can't use any annual leave during your first 6 months, which means that you have to use 21 or 30 days within 6 months. So that's labour law, that's standardised. Now, obviously, it's built into all contracts, but it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why are we punishing individuals that are coming into our business that might want to, let's say something happens, they want to go on holiday, spend time with their family, but they're not allowed to leave. So are they going to be happier by not being able to do that? But then equally, you think about it, we talked about that balance between personal and business. Think about the business perspective. You push everybody's leave to the end of the year, there's going to be issues with coverage. There's going to be people out. They have to take it all because otherwise they're going to carry it over to the next year. And that's a amount of money that has to sit on the budget and the P&L every year going forward. So it directly impacts. I mean, that's just one thing. But it's just about being human with people, listening and say, okay, how can we help? Like, it is what it is. My manager at the moment she's one of the most fantastic examples of this. Is nothing phases her. Issues happen. It's okay. How can we fix it? It's not about shouting at somebody. It's not about saying, why did you do this? Passing blame. Because, I mean, I think I'm now at the stage where if I ever saw anybody shouting at somebody in a meeting, I'd leave. God forbid they tried to shout at me in a meeting. Like, nothing in that, not for that reason, Sam, but, I'm a big enough guy as it is, but do you get the point? Like, there is no place in this world, in business, really, where that calls for somebody to physically shout in somebody else's face. Like, this is not life or death, guys. No. Do you know what I mean? Like, we had this the other, we had unfortunately a member of staff a previous employee who was suffering with an illness. We were having to deal with it, and they're absolutely fine, and it all's good. But you go into a meeting like that, and you're saying, okay, how can we make things better for you? Can we adjust things around, do whatever it is in the best possible way? And then you come out of that meeting and go, man, what a bad break. I mean, you have somebody from finance, procurement, IT, somebody disgruntled calling you going, why hasn't my flight allowance been paid? Why haven't you sent these figures over? And you go, I mean, guys, the world's not going to burn. Do you know what I mean? Like this bigger thing ever. So yeah, kindness and empathy, just being human, I think is the biggest attribute to. I mean, human is it's in the word human resources.
Yeah, I love that.
I think that's a mic drop right there, isn't it? I think that is the crux of it. And I think every conversation we ever have around wellbeing comes back to this human connection and human nature and just being respectful and kind to one another. But what I'm hearing also as a common side effect really of that is trust, right? What you've just demonstrated with your examples is moving from that EVP, right, where it's the marketing, the sales, getting somebody into the employee experience and actually following through and being congruent on your word as an organization and as a team. And that's where I've seen probably firsthand a lot of the troubles begin when, somebody goes in with one expectation, it's just not met. And I would love to hear more examples of how it's worked fantastically well, but is there any your thoughts on that just in general and this like congruency between both?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic point, and listen, it doesn't work all the time. There is this wonderful gold standard that you hope that you sell, but you can't be everywhere all the time. And so I'll try and give you some success stories, but unfortunately, everybody's fallible. That's just the way of the world, and it depends on where you are with things. So I won't stand here and say it always works. We're fantastic across the board. We've tried. I don't know if you've read. There was a book that came out recently last year that I was obsessed with, and it was called Unreasonable Expectations, or Unreasonable Hospitality. What it was, and it was written by the creator and founder of 11 Madison Park, the number one restaurant in the world. Sam, I think you and I have probably spoken about it. And when you talk about exceeding expectations and going above and beyond to create an experience, I've ripped that book off now to implement it into our onboarding process because I just love the theory, the concept of everything. And trust me, these 2 points are going to link, I promise. It's all well and good me taking that information, building it into my onboarding process because I can control that. Okay, so I can control that all the way through. But the one thing that they did in there that we still haven't yet got, it's not just us, it's across any corporate business, is every single department in that restaurant, no matter who it was, where they were, what their role was, bought into one single idea to make the greatest customer experience possible, no matter what. They all believed in that. Didn't matter who it was. They were bought into the ethos. They were bought into the vision. That was their sole purpose. And that is what I feel is missing sometimes in business, because at the top level, we have a vision, we have a mission, everybody goes. We have a company culture. It's written on a board somewhere. I'm not talking specifically about Aleph, but you get what I mean, overarching within businesses. But then it's all well and good saying, the company culture is this. But everybody knows that that's the company culture. Teams have cultures too. Every individual team has a culture. And sometimes, hopefully, they're aligned with what the company culture is. But sometimes they're not. And it's dependent on the individuals that are leading that create that culture underneath them, whatever that might be. And so it's not a problem that I've solved it. I have solved over I've solved over my times in the companies before and where we are now. It's a journey that goes through. It's to try and make sure that we are aligned, so that when we're saying this is what the EVP is, this is what you're going to get when you come and work here, and that's what's delivered. I would say, 80 to 90% of the employees here would say that they enjoy working here because that does exist, but it's not perfect for me. And that's it's the pursuit of perfection. It's making sure that everybody does feel that, and it's different days, different times, different people, but it's making sure that how once we as HR, their first day, you pass them on and they start work, our sort of leverage or access to them, not access, that's the wrong word to put it, but you understand the influence that we have at that stage suddenly, the graph drops off. And, we have them regular check-ins. We do, a first week, a first month, 3 months, and 6 months. We check in over time with them to see how they're going, to talk about things, to find out. And we don't, what is quite nice is that we don't see a significant drop off over that time. We don't have massive outliers where, hang on a sec, you told me that I'd be able to work from home 7 days a week, and now I'm expected to be in the office. We're very clear about from the outset what we have, what we haven't, and where we have gaps. We say we apologize, we own it. That was on us. How do we fix it?
Mm. Yeah, I love that. It's I think something you're touching on there as well. I mean, you said the word several times, is create, right? And I think this is this is the magic sauce for me, is that we're talking about something where we're saying, here's the well-being for your organization, or here's how we're going to take care of you through a recruitment process or your life cycle. And you touched on this right at the very start about saying it's unique for everybody. So if we're not asking them what we want, and Charlotte and I have built wellbeing leaders on this premise of, we don't know, let's ask. Right? So I think that's one of the biggest things that we see in organizations is this, and this is one of my absolute favorite articles, is the in praise of the incomplete leader. I don't know, what do you think? Right? Like that question of being able to just be vulnerable in those micro vulnerabilities, to go, I don't know, actually, I don't know what you want for well-being. What is it? And so I guess, do you think there's a place where we can even sort of start bringing that into an interview process and going, look, how are you feeling right now? What do you need? Is that something which exists in an interview process? Or am I dreaming?
I think it's a very nice utopian world you live in, Sam. I'll be very honest with you. No, listen, I 100% get what you mean. I think there are elements of what of your lovely ideals that can be plugged into the recruitment process, but I think it's in very different guises, because, like I said at the beginning, the way that you implement well-being or integrate well-being into the recruitment process is very different to the way that well-being exists for employees. So asking how they're doing, yeah, that's a great thing, but how much can we really, as employees during the recruitment process, actually give to them throughout the process? I think that making people, come back to the interview process, making people feel as comfortable as possible in the interview itself, I think is the best thing when it comes to that. It's creating an environment where they feel comfortable. Interviews are stressful things for people. Yeah. They get nervous. Nobody, I love talking for a living, but but even still, it's not a comfortable situation to be asked. And you ask me a question about what are my accolades, like, I don't have them to hand. It's not something that you sit and you think about and answer questions and talk about your CV. And it's very often an uncomfortable scenario to be in. Yeah. And so that's why creating an environment where they do feel comfortable, I think is the biggest way that we can implement or create a sense of well-being through a recruitment process.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense, right? Because it's embodying that and modeling it for them as well, right? Because if you're stressed out and you say to somebody you've never met before, how are you? You're not going to get an honest response anyway, probably.
If they're in an interview, literally the definition of an interview is you're trying to sell the best version of yourself. I mean, that's literally it. So why would I go into, do you know what, I'm really having a bad day today. Oh, right. This guy, how's this going to work? Like, you're never going to do that.
Yeah.
But as opposed to saying it, it's then just making them feel at ease. I think genuinely, this is Sam, I hope you don't mind me telling you this story, but I actually interviewed with Sam for a job in one of his past lives, and it was bearing in mind I didn't get it. I was unsuccessful, which is great. Gave me no feedback. Really put me ill at ease.
That's not true.
It's terrible. Months.
We made it on the podcast.
That was it. Now, Sam, can you please let me know if I got the job? Like, it'd be really good.
That is categorically untrue. Excuse me. I ran a very slick recruitment process.
But what I will say, and listen, I've been in a lot of interviews and I've done a lot of things, and the thing that Sam did for the first time in a number of different interviews that I've been in was he created an incredibly comfortable space. Yes, it was an interview, but it was right from the outset. the wonderful thing, and I don't know if this is where you got this from or this was a style that you created or whatever it was, but he said, this is how this is going to work. I'm going to ask you a question, then you're going to ask me a question. He wasn't as aggressive as that, he was his nice, jovial self, but that's how he presented things. And I was like, we should always give candidates the opportunity to ask questions about the business they're going to work in and things like that. But to put it in that, it immediately created a level playing field, and made me feel incredibly comfortable in that environment, going, oh, okay, this is conversational. Like, set the tone from the outset. I mean, it's a testament to who he is as a person. And, I've come to know and unfortunately enjoy his company. But it was, that was a great testament. And it's stuff that I take it into interviews that I do now, rather than wait to the very end of an interview, very end of a 45-minute, 30-minute call. It's what questions can I tell you? Because the interviews are two ways. I tell that to everybody, hiring managers and candidates. Like, we want to know about them, but they need to be comfortable with us. Like, my job is to find the best person for the job. But we have to make sure that the job is right for the person, because otherwise it's just going to be a mismatch when they come in.
Yeah, definitely. I remember I had an interview and I was like super nervous for it. This was probably one of my very first interviews. I was really, really nervous, and then whoever they were interviewing before, the time overrun, and I'm thinking, well, it's like half an hour after my interview time, and I was sitting there getting more and more nervous about this interview the longer I sat there. And it was only that somebody said to me, well, maybe you don't want to work for them. And I'm like, really? It's kind of my choice. I mean, it wasn't quite as black and white as that, but it was just this aha moment of, hang on a minute, they're interviewing me, but I'm interviewing them. And that shifted gears for me, like the whole way through, like my whole career, I think, and just that realization. So I love that you said that, because that it's a two-way street. And I think that's powerful.
But it is, and I think there's trends in the market. I talk specifically about the UAE because that's the Middle East, where I've recruited for the past 11 years. You have what shifts between being a candidate-driven market and a company-driven market. And so sometimes you have an abundance of candidates in the market. And so therefore companies can decide, they can make their choices because there's a lot of candidates availability. And then it shifts and it goes to being a client-driven market with a lack of candidates, niche skill sets. And what's funny is in the last 2 years, it's started to even out, but not in a way that it feels. So, for example, it's still very much a candidate, it's still very much a company-driven market. Okay, so the number of people looking for jobs are greater than the number of jobs available. But candidates are now far more equipped to ask questions about the environments that they're going into. There's still going to be people that are just going to take the first thing, and that's great. And there is nothing wrong with that, because, as we said, this is an environment where you need to have stability and a role for things. But it is not as easy as a company saying, well, we can have whoever we want, because you can't. People genuinely look for all of these different attributes as part of an organization's EVP to say, do I want to work there? And I think it's great. And I would much rather companies, as hard as it is for me to say sometimes, because we want everybody to join us that we think is great. Well, actually, they have to want to join us.
Totally.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how that shifts over time as well. The entrepreneurial revolution is the time that we're in now, right, as well. So now people don't necessarily need a job in the same way they did before, because a lot of people are feeling empowered and have the resource and access to be able to actually set up on their own if they're genuinely really skilled and have got that entrepreneurial spark
to drive for it.
Drive it. Yeah, exactly. So,
I mean, I have to say, what's wonderful is that the UAE specifically, it probably wasn't the right place for that sort of mindset 10 years ago. But I think what they've done over the past 3 years has just blown everything out of the water in terms of the availability for the different types of visas. You can come in here freelancing, creating, and the talk about barriers to entry, like the barriers to entry for people to be here, to be successful. You talk about the American dream of whatever that was back in the big boom. Is what a wonderful place to do it. The support, the drive, the vision from everywhere else, and the environment that we're in, surrounded by people that actually want to make a difference. I mean, and you don't pay tax. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, nice. Sambo, mate, I think we could probably speak all day about all of this. So we really appreciate you coming and bringing your expertise and your thoughts and your experience. We like to ask each guest, what's one well-being habit you see in the workplace for the bin, and one for the win? So I was going the other way around, but we've switched it. So what's the thing you would throw out What's the one for the bin?
I would say company mandated activities.
Forced
So
fun.
it's forced fun. There we go.
Yeah.
Listen, I think that with well-being, there's anything is better than nothing. So there's the
Yes.
first thing to think about. I think anything is better than nothing. So doing one thing is better than doing nothing at all. Obviously, significantly better. But we always talk about well-being being personal. We have to make it available to people, but we can't dictate it, because then it absolutely goes the opposite direction. So yeah, mandated, forced fun, get rid of it.
Okay. And what's your win then?
So a well-being win. Just to make an environment where everybody has the ability to become the best versions of themselves. So an environment that supports innovation, kindness, empathy, supports health, well-being. I think it'd be a much better place if we all just took a step in that direction. Just ask people how they are and actually mean it.
Love that.
Amazing.
Thank you.
No, my pleasure, guys. Absolute joy to talk to you both.
This is our pleasure to have you. Where can our listeners come and find you if they want to continue this conversation with you? Are you quite active on LinkedIn or anywhere in particular?
Yeah, you can find me anywhere on LinkedIn. I'm always posting something or the other, and always enjoy a conversation about this sort of thing. I may not have all the answers, but I love talking about it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Sam. We really appreciate you being here. Appreciate your time and your expertise. Yeah, we love it.
Absolutely.
My pleasure. Have a wonderful day, guys.
You too, you too. And if you're liking the podcast, please like it, subscribe, and share it with your colleagues. And if you're interested in learning more about the Wellbeing Leaders, check us out on wellbeingleaders.me. Thank you again, Sam.
My pleasure, guys.